All right, it is day one of the first clip that I'm building for Machine Multiverse 2022. So I've built basically the framework of the central motion of the trick, and the general idea is it's a gear that will move in two. It'll have like a two directional dynamic compound movement. Well, compound really. And the idea is it will go in an arc over the top while also spinning. So rotation and in two directions. And then three once the actual thing is rotating as well, like this. So it'll start in this position, spin, and then get picked up and move over this way, land like this, and rotate again. And there'll be other gears that it meshes with. That's the idea. Nothing too groundbreaking, but this is coming earlier in the video. This is one of the ones that I have planned for earlier on in the video, and I think the idea from Machine Multiverse is that they sort of get more complex as the video goes on. So this is one of the lesser complicated ones. But I'm actually not as happy with the look of it as I thought I'd be when I sort of visualized it in my head. The motion is a bit smaller than I thought it would be, but I guess I should have probably figured that out. If it's rolling around the outside of the big gear, then of course the actual center of the gear is only going to move the distance of the diameter of the gear. So yeah, I should have probably visualized it, but in my head I sort of imagined it as this sort of big arc shape, but we'll make it work. I might even duplicate this module and make two of these, and then somehow find a way that they mesh with each other, or somehow, one of them happens and then another one happens. So some way of duplicating it, or some way of having two of them interact in some way. I think just doing one of them is a little bit too basic, but I think, just repeating it or doing it synchronized or something is a nice way of making it look a little bit beefier without really making it any more complicated and without going out of my way to design a whole new thing. Just adding a little bit extra, a little bit something else to it. But yeah, we'll see how things go tomorrow. It is day 2 of Machine Multiverse Clip 1, and there's been a lot of progress. So yesterday, all I had was one of these modules, and I thought that maybe I would make another one, and I have, except this one's mirrored. I didn't know I was going to do that yesterday. Big fancy stuff. I wasn't super happy with the size of the actual motion of the module I made yesterday. I thought it would be bigger, so I made it bigger by duplicating it. And the idea is that now we've got two of these sort of rotating and rolling and flipping gears that align into place. So obviously these three line up right here. This is the starting position. And my idea was to have the two gears flip and flip over into a position here and here. So they start in a line of 3, so they're spaced so that one gear can fit in between the two that flip. And then when they flip, they come here and here, so they mesh together without a gear in the center. And you'll see what that looks like in just a sec, because the thing I've worked on today, aside from just installing this center gear, has been figuring out how I'm going to make them flip over in a synchronized way and in a controlled way. There's a whole thing with managing weight and figuring out how they're actually going to flip and how to actually hold that weight back to start. So this is the method I came up with. I put these little arms on the gear itself. But they do rotate freely because after a point they need to be able to fold down and not rotate with the gear. So basically, they need to pull until around here, but then right? Like if this was attached, it wouldn't be able to go down all the way because this red arm would hit here. So it needs to rotate freely so that this can collapse separately and it can sort of only move a certain distance but still allow the rest of it to rotate. So anyway, that's a little bit in into the weeds, I guess, in terms of detail. But let's do the flip motion so we can sort of see how that looks. Hopefully, so I've done a couple of tests, and I'm not super happy with how it looks, but it does work. I'd love to get it so that it's like perfectly synchronized and they both do the exact same thing and they just like click into place in a really satisfying way. There's like some uncomfortable, unsatisfying jostling around and unsynchronizing that happens. But yeah, so this is how it looks. Yeah, you can see the one on the left sort of, there was a little bit of extra movement for some reason. And I think sometimes it's going to be the one on the right. Sometimes it'll be both. Like, it just sort of depends. I don't think that's a problem that can just be fixed in a specific way. It's probably just going to be fixed by doing this enough times until I get a take where they both look good. But yeah, so you can see they now line up and they mesh together here. Obviously, it took some time to line everything up and make sure that happened. And, there are magnets underneath here. That was the other thing that took me a long time today. There's like some plexiglass stuff to just constrain everything. But yeah, that's today's update. So next is going to be actually attaching them to gears, or like creating a full gear chain or a gear line. Because obviously once it's in the starting position, it needs to do something. And then once it's in the end position, it needs to do something. And I need to have, other gears here and here to sort of connect to these two, and then here and here to connect to the line of three. So yeah, we're not really that close to being done yet, but the main bulk of the trick is out of the way and working. So that's a good thing. It is day 3. And we've added the gears at the front of the table that will rotate during the initial position, the initial starting position of the two flipping gears. So yes, they're lined up in the line of 3. The center one obviously doesn't move. The two on the end are the ones that flip. So we've got these 2 gray gears, one over here and one here on either side, and they are attached to rotating wheels where I can wrap a string around them, and both of them have the string wrapped around them. The problem with like gear tricks like this, where when they line up in a certain position, they like complete a gear chain. There are a couple things you can do to like sort of prove that fact, right? To demonstrate that fact and to show that the line completes a completed gear chain. And you can do it where there are like tracks on the gears themselves that actually line up into a straight line and form a track or something. You can do it with just rotating arms. I've done this in the past before, where you just kind of have one gear have an arm on it, and you just pull on the arm, and then the last gear in the chain has another arm on it that rotates a certain amount, and maybe that pushes a ball or knocks over a domino or something. But the problem with both of those methods, or actually no, the track one doesn't have a problem with it, but that's not really feasible here because these gears can't have tracks on them. But the problem with the rotating arm method is that you don't get a lot of time to process what's going on, right? Because you can only pull the arm like at most about halfway, about 180 degrees. And the problem with gears is that it's instantaneous. Like when you start rotating the first one, the end rotates, the one at the end of the chain rotates as well immediately. So if you have something happen after only a short amount of rotation, it's going to basically look like it's teleporting. So you want to have as much rotation of the gear chain as possible before the next thing happens. So ideally, there's a few beats involved, right? So you see the gear chain start to rotate, or I guess the first thing you'd see is whatever the release is for it. So you'd see the release for it, you'd see the gears start to rotate, and then you'd want that beat for you to process, oh, okay, the gears are rotating, and then something else needs to happen. you don't want it to all be instantaneous where the gears start to rotate and the next thing happens immediately. And that's really hard to do unless you use string pulls and have a more than 180 degree rotation that you would get with a rotating arm. So it's a lot more work to do it this way because you have to basically make all these things with the wheels and everything, and then make another thing where the wheels winds up the string, and it's a big do, but it's worth it for the effect. And I'll demonstrate it in a second. You'll really be able to tell what I'm saying because I'll release the release mechanism. You'll see the gears rotate for a little bit, and then the ball will be released. It's a nice flow. So that was what I worked on today. I've also got the release in for the actual clothespin, which again releases the weight off the table this way, and that flips the gears. So, like I said, I'm going to show you in a second the gears rotating, but you'll also see the thing flip over because that's all connected. So yeah, let's do that. Ready? Here we go. So ready? Well, that was actually a really perfect test. Remember last time, yesterday, the test that I did, the two gears, they did land in the proper position, but it wasn't perfect visually. They kind of bounced around and jostled around a little bit. That one looked really great. So yeah, that's today's progress. Tomorrow, the job will be basically doing more or less the same thing I did today, which I don't know if I'll do the exact same thing where they mesh with two more gears in the back. I'll have to figure it out, but obviously they're going to mesh with more gears, except the ones here might not be vertically oriented. They might be horizontally oriented. We'll have to see. Yeah, but that'll be tomorrow, is installing, what happens in the second position. But yeah, it's coming along really nicely. I'm really happy with the progress I made today. Day 4, and the clip is done. So, the things I've added today, aside from some transitions, which we'll get to, are the two gears in the back. And this was actually really difficult to figure out how I was going to do it. I remember last update I said I might try to make the gears like horizontally oriented relative to the table. And that didn't actually work because the gears rotate in a weird way. So as they come down, this rotation here, when it still has 180 degrees left of rotation to do, you can even see it here a little bit. It actually clips the gear that it's supposed to mesh with. So it actually contacts it here. And this was the best that I could really do where that wouldn't happen. But when I mounted them horizontally, it was really noticeable, and it was unavoidable. So they couldn't actually be mounted horizontally, unfortunately. That would have been better because obviously from the camera perspective, these gears that are vertical underneath are almost impossible to see. So my justification for it, aside from it's the only possible way, is that you do see the gears when these two, the yellow ones, are in the initial position. So you at least know they're there. But again, this is not ideal, and I wouldn't expect anyone necessarily to even notice them, because obviously you're looking at the front of the table when the gears are rotating at first, and then you're not even going to be looking back here until the gears flip back there. So it's possible no one would even notice that there are gears back there. So it's tough. It's tough. It's not an ideal solution, but this does work. You notice when I pull on this, it rotates the other arm, so it completes the gear chain. And this is what I was talking about in one of the previous updates about a rotating arm is what I think I called it. So I drew the comparison between having it rotate a wheel to make the gears rotate a lot, so that the motion from one side of the gear chain to the other isn't immediate. You want there to be a beat. I decided I wasn't going to do that for the back just because there wasn't really enough room. And also, we've already established that this is a gear chain. So you're already expecting it to complete a gear chain a second time. So you don't necessarily need to, I don't want to say walk through, but you don't have to make it extremely obvious. You can trust the viewer to keep up, basically. So it pulls on this and rotates the other arm. This will knock a ball into here. So that's the big thing. And then the smaller things are the connections on the side. So a ball goes down the tube, down here, and then the red string pull to leave the frame. And then we have billiard ball on Hot Wheels as the intro, and that just presses on the lever, which starts the gears to rotate. This minor connection here is what gets from the actual flipping of the gears to the rotation of the secondary gear chain. So yeah, that's basically it. I'm going to move on to trying to get this to work. Shouldn't be too hard. I haven't really had any problems with reliability on this, but I will probably end up doing several takes until I get a take that I really like and where the motion is really smooth, really synchronized, and symmetrical. So that might take a couple of tries, but it shouldn't be too much of a headache. It is day one of the second clip for Machine Multiverse 2022, and this one is going to be a weird one. And by that I mean it's going to be a very tall one. So I'm already dreading how I'm actually going to film this thing, but the general idea is that it is a variant on the classic ball lift, but with an extra flexible arm here, which is this blue thing, that can actually move around and adjust the positioning of the actual lifter. So there isn't one at the moment, but eventually there will be a holder for a ball here, and then there will be some method of actually lifting and lowering the ball lift on this end. But I just got it to a position, or I got it, the whole trick to a point where it was functional enough that I could at least demonstrate the idea for this update. So yeah, the first step, the first part of this, it's kind of a two-stage thing, right? Because a lot of tricks have sort of a two-step thing that shows position one, and then some variable changes, and then that allows a different type of motion. And the same formula applies to this clip. So position one is this, with the lift arm at the bottom position. You can see that this can move up and down. At the bottom position, it does this, right? And you can see that it's not, again, I mean, even just filming the update is difficult. But it moves a little bit, but it's nothing too exciting. And then what I'm going to have happen is this will lift up, right? Which does move this at the bottom a little bit. But the more exciting thing is that now, if I can hold this, I don't know if this is going to be really possible. But now, I'll hold it here. You can see that when this comes up now, the whole thing goes up a lot taller, right? So before the position was here, right? It was just doing this. But now it goes all the way up to here because the whole thing lifts up. So yeah, it's like, there you go. That's a better way of seeing it. So you can see how it slides along there. Right, that's the premise. All right, so that's that. And like I said, it's going to require some controls over here. It's going to require a pulley system to actually pull the thing up, and it's going to require some actual ball holder here. And then, the balls obviously will have to get deposited in, and then there are going to be loading tracks here. There's going to have to be depositing tracks for when this actually comes up, and the balls will have to exit off somewhere. So I have a feeling that this trick is going to end up ballooning into some really large thing with a lot of connections and a lot of steps, and it's going to be a big annoying thing. But okay, for now at least, it seems to be working. So we'll take things as they come. All right, day two of this clip, and things are progressing very nicely, and it's actually turning out that this clip might be slightly less of a nightmare than I thought it might be. I don't want to speak too soon, but it's sure shaping up that way. So progress today, I added the ball holders on each end. So there's one on this side for the really heavy metal ball, and then there's one on this side, which is, I decided to use these foosballs, because obviously there are two, it goes up twice, one each time. So let's do the first iteration. Let's just put one in there, and then grab the metal ball. Metal ball goes in here. So I decided actually that I wouldn't have anything load the current or initial position. I would just, the clip would start with the balls already in this position and just something would release the ball lift. This giant block, this support, is going to end up supporting the track that will lead out from the ball lift. You'll notice when this lifts up, it's going to deposit it into nothingness, just into empty space, which it's only like that because I don't have the track there. This is the support for the track that I have yet to build. So yes, here's the initial position. And then the ball rolls out. Again, it's hard to film. We'll do it again, and I'll film the bottom this time. So ball here. Oh. All right, let's do this the smart way. Lighter side first, then heavy side. All right. There you go. So it's not actually that exciting of a motion, and that's on purpose. Now, the idea is that this lift arm causes a dynamic motion about this thing sliding. And it does actually technically move a little bit in this position, but it's not that noticeable, so it's not that exciting. And that's the point. It's meant to be a contrast. So let's do it again, except this time, the other thing I've added is the entire infrastructure for actually moving the lift arm. So if I make sure it's on the pulley, actually. Okay, here's the start position, and then we can release the clothespin, and that will adjust the lift arm. All right, so that by itself not that interesting. But then what happens is that allows the ball lift to sort of elongate as it lifts. All right, which looks like, come on, be heavy enough, come on. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to take a look at that. Well, anyway, so yes, it becomes long enough and lifts up. So again, I gotta really back up. Yeah, that's the idea. Okay, it's just impossible to film. Okay, so yes, it's taller now, and so there'll be two tiers of track, one that's like this and one that's like this. And that'll be the trick. So this is one of those tricks where like 80% of what I have to build is just connections. So my AC just turned on. So that's a sign for me to shut up and move on to day 3. It's day 3 of this clip for Machine Multiverse, and look at all the progress. Yesterday we left off with pretty much just the basic structure of the trick, and I had installed a little bit of the support for the double track system on the right side, but that was basically it. So today, a lot of the big stuff, a lot of the stuff I worked on is just large, so it looks like I made a lot of progress, but it really is it's a normal day of progress. Just a couple of tracks here, some connection systems like this and that. But it looks large. But let's talk about it. So, and I will actually demonstrate things too. I have it set up to demonstrate. So the thing I was worried about yesterday was that this would end up sort of ballooning into a big confusing mess with a lot of tracks that make it confusing what is actually important and what is just a pretty minor connection. And sort of, I had to figure out how to make it very clear what the viewer should actually be focused on and what was actually the important thing. And so that's what these numbers do. They help reinforce this idea that, because I was talking yesterday about contrast, about how a lot of, or actually I think this might have been day 1, how a lot of tricks are about demonstrating something happening in a certain way, then changing a variable, and then demonstrating how that changed the output and the outcome. And that's basically this exact trick. So we have the ball lift that lifts in the first position and deposits the ball in the first track on the lower level, and then one of the variables changes, that is, this lift arm lifts up, and then that causes the ball to be output on the second track, which is taller, and that's the whole point. You want people to really be focused on these two tracks. And then because this is Machine Multiverse and I can't just match the transition myself, and it's going to be transitioning to some other builder, I need to be accommodating for what their their transition in can actually be, which means that if this were just me, I could just have the track go out of frame at the very at this level and just have the next clip start really high. But I want to be nice, so I had to have both balls drop back down to a normal table level, and then continue out of frame. And I like the symmetry of this as well, having the 90-degree pipe turns. And it took a long time to make both of these clear tubes line up right at the bottom. I had to fiddle around with making the tracks sloped different amounts and all that, and figuring out how to support them is also tough. But anyway, that's that. So yeah, let's do the demo. So first thing that happens. Oh, the other thing, I didn't mention this yet. I said yesterday that I was going to use these foosballs. I actually think I had the orange and the green one that I was using. But it worked fine for the first iteration, but the second one was too heavy. And so instead of adjusting how much weight needed to be added to the system to make both balls work, it would have been, if the weight was the same for both, it would have either gone way too fast for one of them or way too slow for the other one, or I would have had to add or adjust the weight somehow, which just seemed inelegant, and it felt like it would make the clip, like I said, it would make even more connections that needed to be made. And so I decided that I would just use two different types of balls, one that was lighter than the other. So to give some semblance of a match, they are both little soccer balls, but one of them is a foosball, the other is a ping pong ball. But anyway, I did decide to change the balls. So here's the first iteration. This is the one that goes on to the lower level, and that's actually connected all the way up until this system, which is just a lever that resets the ball lift. So it goes up, comes down through the 90-degree pipe, down this track, and then this ball pushes the lever to reset the ball lift and knocks over this domino. So that's the first part, which looks like this. Perfect. All right. So that domino will pull on a string or two strings to release both the yellow ping pong ball on this track, which will just get loaded into the ball lift, and then this heavy metal ball will be released on this track, and then this one goes down and into that end. But in the meantime, it presses on the straw about, I was going to say a quarter of the way down, but it presses on it here. That knocks off that weight, and that releases the system that I had built yesterday with the clothespin. And that's what actually operates the lift. So that's what actually moves the lift arm, the blue system thing here. And that pulls this along slightly. And that's what changes the position of the sliding blue lift arm. So that looks like this. Perfect. So hopefully it's obvious how the sliding system actually changes the height that the ball gets lifted to, and you can see it gets deposited on track 2 there. So yeah, I don't know. It might not be that exciting of a clip, but I think it's really well made, and it's pretty clean. I don't know. I think jury's still out as to whether it's actually cool, but I like it for a couple of other reasons. I guess the only other thing to mention is what this white rectangle thing is here. And this is to cover up the silver balls. Whoop, I just bumped the microphone. This is to cover up the silver balls, the metal balls. And it was an open question for a little while whether the metal balls would actually do anything when they exited the ball lift. It's certainly an open path that could cause something to happen, right? I could very well have the balls actually hit something and trigger the next step. But I actually didn't need them. I decided that, well, I had thought for a little while that maybe the ball that exits the top of the ball lift on, the numbered tracks would do one thing, and then the ball that rolls out on the bottom would do another thing. Maybe one would put in the next ball while the other one lifted the lift arm, or like the blue, and changed the angle of the lift arm. And I thought maybe one would do that, one would do the other thing. But then I decided just to clean things up and have it be more linear instead of multiple things happening at once. Just make it easier on myself and have one thing cause one thing cause one thing. As much as possible. And so I realized these balls don't even need to do anything. And so to avoid the viewer watching them and expecting them to do anything, because obviously they do roll, and that might draw your eye, I decided to just cover them up, make them go behind a wall that you can't see, and make it very clear you're not supposed to watch them. So this is a trick that Joseph used in his last video, Pass the Wine. It's something I've done before with Breakthrough Machine, actually also to hide metal balls, or one metal ball. It's just like a very clear signpost that just goes, don't look at this. It's not important. So hopefully that'll work. But yeah, not much left to do. Really, there's very, very little left to do. I think this might be the last update, unless tomorrow just takes a whole ton of time and requires a ton of problem solving. It's really just like this connection to work out, putting in the strings, and then just something to release the ball lift at the start. That's basically it. So, yeah, that is the ball lift clip for Machine Multiverse.